It's the Criterion. It's the Criterion. Criterion. N. Project.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Criterion Project. This is the monthly podcast that we do where we talk about one of the films that is on the Criterion channel. We talk about the highs, lows of the good things about it, the things we didn't maybe like as much about it. And it's a lot of fun. And we are talking today about the film or The Room with a View, the adaptation of the M. Forster novel. And I'm Rachel, and Conrado is here.
Yes, he definitely is. I'm Conrado. I'm very happy to be here.
Are you ready to have a little vicarious Italian vacation?
Oh, I'm always ready for an Italian vacation.
Yeah. And so, yes. So I thought this was my choice this month. It was kind of for two reasons. One, because I love it, and I thought it was very sort of summery. Seemed like a good pick for July, and then also it's my book club happened to be reading it the same month because it was also my choice for book club. So I thought that would be kind of fun to reread the book and to watch the movie, to cover it in two ways in 1 month. So that's what we ended up doing. This movie was made in 1985, and it is by director James Ivory and producer Ismail Merchant. And so it's going to be fun to talk about. But first, what we like to do is we talk about what we have been watching on the Criterion channel, aside from the assigned film. So have you been able to watch anything else?
Yeah, I have a couple things to recommend. Especially, I've been watching, they've put a lot of Pedro Almodovar movies on the Criterion channel. And he is a quite famous Spanish director. He's won a couple Oscars for his movies, and he is, around the world, he's really considered one of like the top famous directors. He makes very unique movies, a lot of sort of women and gay themes, and a lot of like intricate plots and twists and turns, and they're a lot of fun. I really love them. I have been watching some of them. I watched Talk to Her from 2002, which actually won the Oscar for original screenplay. And I think you have also seen it, right, Rachel?
Yeah, I did it for one of my blind spot picks a couple of years ago. I have a series on my blog where each month I review a classic movie or popular movie that I haven't seen, and so I did that. I try to make it a mix of indies and foreign films and pop culture favorites, things like that. And so I did it 1 year, and I did enjoy it. It's very weird. It's definitely not for everybody, but if you're looking for something outside the box that has something to say, and it's kind of funny, then I think it's a pretty good choice.
Yeah, his movies tend to be always at least a little funny, and especially the earlier ones. And Talk to Her is basically the story about these two women who are in a coma, and then the two men who are sort of taking care of them, and how their lives intersect. And there's a lot of strange twists and turns and things that happen. It's a very, I would say, it's a very complex, uniquely structured screenplay. So I'm not surprised. I'm a little surprised because it's one of the few foreign language films to have won the Oscar for screenplay, but it's very well deserved in my opinion. It's a very exciting movie for anyone who's interested in that sort of thing, sort of pulpy and twisty.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a surprising choice, though, to get something the Academy wouldn't normally recognize, not only because it's foreign, but it's so odd odd, like in a
Yeah.
good way. But I don't know. I actually said in my review, I was like, I don't feel like this would win best screenplay now, but I don't know.
Um,
I guess hard to
well,
say.
yeah, I mean, you never know. I think there were a couple of things going on back then. I think Almodovar was kind of at the height of his popularity back then.
Mhm.
Also, there was a bit of a little scandal where Spain didn't decided to not submit Talk to Her as the foreign language entry that year. So it couldn't get nominated for foreign language, but it was a popular movie and it was critically acclaimed. So they put a campaign for the other categories. And so it got nominated in screenplay and director and clearly had a lot of support because they ended up winning screenplay.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's interesting.
Yeah, there was a bit of a campaign and, a story behind it.
Oh, okay. Huh. Yeah, I only had time to watch one additional film this month. I was looking at some of the Christmas movies for Christmas in July. And so I watched the movie Placido. And this is a Spanish film, 1961. I don't know. It didn't resonate with me. I didn't love it. It was kind of weird. It's I felt like the movie was a lot of setup and not enough meat to it, not enough story. It was weird. It was about this tradition, I guess, in Spain, or maybe just in this town, of they will find a homeless person and invite them to dinner for Christmas, and everybody's kind of expected to find their homeless person, and so most of the movie is these people trying to find their homeless person, and then telling the story of one of the homeless person. And I don't know, it was just, I felt like it was all this setup, and like you never got to see the dinner and see the, I don't know, it was just odd to me. I didn't love it, but I don't know, maybe I missed something.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like an interesting premise. I had actually never heard of it, but
yeah, it was, I don't know, it was odd. I don't know if certain parts of it just, or maybe there's like a cultural barrier that was preventing me from, or if it's just something from, it's 1961, but I don't know. It was a weird movie. It was a weird movie for me. But anyway, so that's the one that I watched. I just have been so busy, especially this month, since it's kind of a book and a movie to talk about for book club and for this. So anyway, we got the one in.
Yes, but let's get into it then.
Yes. So Room with a View. And this is not the first time that I have suggested it for a book club. And in the past I did. And both times it got kind of mixed results.
Okay.
And it's interesting because Ian Forster's his other very popular novel, Howard's End, it also, like, I absolutely love Howard's End. I love the book, and my sister and my mom, both of them are kind of lukewarm. They don't love it, but I just love it. And I think what I think he does so well in his writing is that there's so many dynamic characters, that it's not just your lead character who experiences something. Like, he has these incredibly rich, deep well of characters within his writing. So you'll have a very minor character who is only in a couple scenes sometimes, and yet you see a whole arc for them. You see a whole, especially in Howard's End, like the Bass and, characters that, and I feel like he does such an incredible job of creating a character that could just be a sort of a throwaway character. Someone like Cecil, we'll talk about that. In most sort of romantic comedies, sort of the wrong guy is just, you don't care about them. He's not interesting, and just kind of funny, and that's fine. But this, I actually did care about Cecil. I actually think he's an interesting person, an interesting character, and so that's what I love about Ian Forster's writing, and so I think. Other people, it just doesn't ring as true for them, and that's fine. But anyway, so yeah, that's it's an interesting thing with Ian Forster. But what did you think about the? What were your overall thoughts about the movie?
My overall thoughts were that it was a really good movie. I had a great time watching it. It was a little unexpected for me because I don't read a lot of novels, so haven't read any of Ian Forster's. I have seen, however, Howard's End, the movie adaptation, and I had seen other Merchant Ivory movies like The Remains of the Day, and those two are much more, I would say, dramatic and serious than A Room with a View. So when I watched this one, I was a little surprised to find that it is basically a romantic comedy, just like set in, Edwardian England. And I had a really good time watching it because it's just, the story about this girl who is trying to find love and trying to decide within what is expected from her and what her family expects her to marry and what she actually loves, but is a little reticent to accept into her life because it's not, proper, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I thought the movie was quite funny, and like you say, the supporting characters are really fun and memorable, and it looks amazing. I think the cinematography and the production design, the costumes, it looks like $1 million or £1 million, perhaps. Yeah, I had a great time watching it.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's very well cast. As probably Helena Bonham Carter at the height of her powers.
In her breakthrough role, right? I think this was one of her first movie roles that she ever got, and in the lead, and she does a great job.
Great job. I think she captures that sort of innocence, that sort of vulnerability. You understand why she's making the choices that she's making. And yeah, it's definitely an escapist kind of film. The idea that, people are just basically fated for each other, that and that you get sort of the escapism of, I don't know, just the whole idea of going to Italy and having this passionate experience is very escapist and very, very fun. And yeah, the whole rest of the cast is excellent. Of course, you have Judi Dench,
Maggie Smith.
Yeah, Maggie Smith. You have Daniel Day-Lewis in one of his first roles. It's really fun. And so good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Why don't we talk about the cast for a moment? I want to know who your favorite performance is in the movie, because I feel like there's a lot of really great ones.
Well, I think I really like I really like Julian Sands as George. He's very dreamy, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think
That's very interesting, because I actually was going to ask you about it, because I found his character and his performance one of the hardest to follow, and I was wondering if there was maybe more in the book. I don't know, but I'm really interested. Please keep talking about it.
He's so confident, and he's so, I don't know, I just think he's super sexy, and just he knows what he wants, and he's very confident, and I don't know, there's just something about him that's very attractive, I think. And I mean, I think this movie has one of the great movie kisses. And if you follow the Hallmarkies podcast, you know that I love kissing scenes in movies. It's ridiculous, but I do. And I don't know. I just.
So we're talking about the first kiss
Yes.
in the meadow. Yeah.
Yes, it's so good. And it's great in the book, but it's, I don't know, it's just so confident. It's very, very escapist and very, very sexy, I think. And I do really like, I like Helena Bonham Carter. I really like Daniel Day-Lewis. I think he does a ton with a role that could easily be just a throwaway.
And it's hilarious.
That he could just I don't know, that could just be just a boring rich guy or the wrong guy that you see in romantic comedies, like I was saying, but you actually care about him. You feel sad for him. Like he seems like a really sweet guy, I think, Cecil.
I don't know if I agree with that, but I will tell you, I went into this movie and didn't know so much about it. So I knew Daniel Day-Lewis was in it, and I assumed that he was going to play like the romantic lead, like he does in like The Age of Innocence or Last of the Mohicans or something. And then I put in the movie, and halfway through he appears, and he is not the romantic lead at all. He's like sort of like uptight comedic dude, and I was thrown back at first, but then I was having a blast because he's so funny. He's so prickly. He reminded me of his performance in Phantom Thread, which I love. So I thought he was incredible. I think he's one of my favorite performances in the movie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he doesn't listen very well, and he's got his flaws, but I don't know. There was still like a sweetness, I thought, to him when he asks if he can kiss Lucy, and he's terrible at it, and when he seems genuinely shocked when she calls off the engagement, seems genuinely sad. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he's just not a fit for Lucy at all. And so
I could agree with that. I agree he's not necessarily a bad person. I do think he has this sort of, he's just so boxed into this, hierarchy of British nobility and high class, that he can't really think outside of that box. I feel like he's very guarded and very based on images. You know how he makes fun of the novel that they're reading because it is passionate, and it. Kind of like a person today a snooty person might like look down at like a Hallmark movie, because it's like passionate and like meant to make people swoon or whatever, and it's not high art or whatever. So he's definitely fitting into that like snobby mold.
But there's just I just felt like they took a part, and sometimes you see this in the Hallmark movies, that the wrong guys will just be completely ridiculous, and you don't even, like a bad man of business, and you don't even care about them at all. But every once in a while, you'll have a performer who elevates, and you actually do feel, it's just like he's not a bad person, just not the right guy, like for our leading lady. And so I do always appreciate that when I feel like people that's what I like about Ian Forster's writing, is I feel like he takes these small characters that would just be sort of a throwaway in most writers' hands, and give them a little bit more nuance and a little more depth, and you see a little bit of growth from them. I think it's easy to sort of write a story where it's just your heroine or your hero is the one who has all the growth, or maybe a trio you might have, but to have 4, 5, 6 characters, then I don't know. But I really like Denholm Elliott as George's father. I think he's great.
Very sweet.
The scene between him and Lucy, when he says, why should anybody trust you when you've been lying to all of us this whole time? I think that whole scene is really, really well done.
Yeah. And also I would say to what you were saying about supporting characters having their own arcs and their own growth, I would say Maggie Smith's character, she's basically like Lucy's chaperone and a cousin of the family.
Yeah.
And I think the way her story develops in the movie, how you know, she also seems to me like someone who's kind of trapped into this sort of British rules, but also has like this freer spirit to herself that she has totally repressed. And then when it comes out a little bit here and there, um, you know, like when she wants to gossip with the Judy Dench character, and that ends up really hurting Lucy. And I feel like she has a whole, you know, I feel like she's also really great in the movie. And she's also one of my favorite performances.
Yeah, she's wonderful. So yeah, I really like the title, the different title cards. We're going to say now Lucy is lying to Mr. Emerson. Lucy is lying to, and all those. I think that's fun.
It seems very theatrical somehow, or like a novel kind of. It's very fun.
Mm-hmm. So I was thinking, what do you think it says? The movie says about like living a passionate life.
Well, the movie kind of reminded me of Sense and Sensibility a little bit in its themes, you know, of sort of, obviously this is much more one-sided, right? Because in Sense and Sensibility, you have the two sisters who have to kind of to learn to be a little bit more like the other one. Whereas here, it's just really Lucy basically going to Italy, realizing that there's passion in the world, and then coming back to England and learning how to bring that sort of passion to her own life and accept it, right? That's kind of how I see it.
That not everything in life kind of makes sense. Like some things you have to go with your gut. You have to go with what's, you know, is really speaking to you. And I not do the most sensible, as you say, sensible choice, but to go with what you have passion for, and to take risks and things. I like that about it. And
not necessarily what society expects of you, which I think, you know, of course, E.M. Forster, famously a gay writer, so I feel like he's putting some of his own experience sort of feeling, you know, desire and love for someone that is totally unaccepted at that time, especially.
Right. Yeah. I was thought it might be interesting to just quickly talk about the comparison between this movie and the recent Call Me by Your Name, which is also based on a novel, not Ian Forster novel, but I feel like there's quite a bit in common, both about a young person going to Italy, having this, you know, romantic experience that you know, changes them. What do you think about that, the comparison of those two?
And also written by James Ivory, who directed Everyone with a View. So there's an extra connection there. But I would say, if anything, to me, Call Me by Your Name is almost a more explicit version of the sort of repressed desire and sort of gay metaphor that is in this movie, right? Because in that movie, the characters are actually gay. And what is kind of, I feel like someone who is gay in the 80s might have seen this movie and sort of identify with this idea of, I am really in love with this person that I'm not supposed to, and it feels different. It's not what society wants, right?
Right.
So I think in that sense, they're very similar. I don't know how much Call Me by Your Name really is about embracing passion versus a more repressed and structured society. I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
I mean, I think it is just all the sort of montages about sort of their Italian life, and you know, you see all these scenes of them like eating and kind of feasting, and then you know, cycling through the town, and I don't know, there's just a lot of, I feel like it's very sort of passionate living. It's definitely sort of a theme of the movie. It's definitely more explicit, obviously, than this movie. But I don't know, just in the sense, I feel like this movie has a lot of scenes of, you know, you have the whole skinny dipping scene. You have scenes where she's in Rome, you know, looking at the statues, and to me, it kind of has some of that same sort of flavor. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely Call Me by Your Name is definitely less of a fantasy, and than this. Obviously, it has a bittersweet ending, so it's not exactly the same. But I don't know, just that I feel like it has a similar tone.
Yeah, I would say the biggest difference for me is that in Call Me by Your Name, we never really leave Italy, right? So we don't see the world that these people are sort of escaping from quite in the same way, because the parents in Call Me by Your Name are quite understanding, and there's a lot of love, and it's a little
That's
more.
true.
It doesn't feel quite as oppressive as like when Lucy comes back to England and then she has this fiance, and you can see how the whole society really bases their judgment of a person around the sort of things that they do.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I agree there. What do you think makes this a Criterion, makes Room with a View a Criterion film?
Well, I would say there is something here about Merchant Ivory, right? And I guess E.M. Forster totally agree. But also Merchant and Ismail Merchant and James Ivory were also gay, and they were married, I guess, or at least they were partners. I don't know if they were married.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And so that's, I think, partially why they gravitate toward Forster's writing. They made, I think, 3 adaptations of his work throughout their career. And I think there's something here about, historically, I feel like Merchant and Ivory really took the sort of English period piece to a different level that it hadn't been before, right? Like these costume dramas used to be so regarded as just like plain boring and like just literary adaptations, and they weren't really cinematic or didn't bring anything fun to it. And I think this movie really proves how you can take those like what some people might consider stodgy novels and transform them into something that has life of its own. I think the movie really benefits from being able to see all these beautiful Italian places, like you can really see how this will affect a person's view of the world who has never seen something like that before, right? In a time before television and before, I guess there were photographs back then, but in black and white. And then you come to actually be in the place. Even now, it's different to see a photo or a video than to actually be, in a place like that. And so I think the movie really benefits from that, and from, like you said, the title cards, and there's such interesting filmmaking and such wonderful supporting performances, and they really like sort of elevating to another level. And on top of that, you have the whole, I think their work as Merchant Ivory has really cemented itself as sort of like an important part of what we would call like queer cinema, or, that sort of thing. So I think definitely.
Yeah, and I think there's sort of a meta level to the movie with involving this writer played by Judi Dench, and her and Charlotte telling Miss Lavish the story of the kiss, and then then Cecil reading and so you got sort of like romantic fantasy on like several kind of meta levels, and so I think that helps it. Anytime you can get meta with Criterion, that's gonna help your case.
Sure. That's a really fun part when she actually writes about it in the book, and then because obviously that is such a thing that would scandalize British society, or a society that is so built around image and gossip.
Yeah. Well, and even in our society now, people will read a fluffy romantic novel, and obviously they vary in quality and things. But there's this sort of how can people watch this stuff? How can people read this stuff? But it's so interesting to me, because if you sit down and talk and listen to people about how they met their spouse, usually it kind of plays out like a romantic comedy. It's usually not usually there's sort of a meet cute, and usually there's like conflict, and then there's the obviously hopefully they have some passion, and anyway it's kind of interesting that way to me, and so I don't know, I just think this shows that kind of meta level, that what we kind of sneer at in literature and maybe in film, is actually like there's some truth to that.
Yeah.
If that makes
Not
sense.
only that, but also I feel like even now, be it a book or a movie or anything, if we feel like it might be like based on something that happened in real life, or might be autobiographical, I feel like people are really quick to run and see like, oh, like I don't know if like
Yeah,
Maggie Smith made a movie that was based kind of on her life. People would, oh, so this actually really happened, and what did she do? And like,
right.
you know,
That's,
how much of this is actually happened in real life and how much is made up and things like that. So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I agree with you too. Just the lushness of the film with the beautiful cinematography, the beautiful music is great, and it just and the terrific acting. So all in all, it's just a wonderful wonderful film,
Mm-hmm.
and it just yeah, definitely feels like a Criterion worthy. That's for sure to me. But yeah, some people will probably think that both the book and the movie are a little slow and a little boring for some people, and there's definitely, I don't know, people who don't get into romance like I do, and don't like the period pieces like I do, which is fine. But I love my costume dramas, so
Mm-hmm.
it's good. I also I absolutely love Helena Bonham Carter's hair in this movie.
Oh, incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
It's like some of the best hair I've ever seen. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
And in that era when they would have the like kind of poofy updos and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
and so it's such a contrast when especially at the end when she has her hair all down in the honeymoon, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh wow,
When
like
she lets it down.
yeah.
That's when I was really impressed. I mean, she looks amazing throughout, but when she lets it down, I'm like, oh my God,
All right.
how do you get hair like that?
Yeah. So
Um, yeah.
anyway, it's
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
it's
and
great.
another thing about why this is a Criterion film, maybe like a more superficial thing, but this movie was a big hit with critics and with audiences. It did really well in the US box office in the UK, and then it ended up nominated for 8 Oscars and won 3 of them, including adapted screenplay for Ruth Prower Jabala, which we should mention because she's
Mm,
worked with Merchant Ivory for a really long time. She basically wrote all of their screenplays through their
mm,
collaboration, and she won 2 Oscars for it, for this and for Howard's End, and she's a really great writer.
that's really cool. That's really good. So on the pretentious scale, what do you think uh, you would say? Is this something
Yeah.
it's it's super pretentious, but you still like it, or it's not pretentious at all, or
Hmm.
what would you say as far as that for
Yeah, I
Criterion?
think I think this one's tricky because I feel like anything that is based on a novel and a period piece or whatever, it's always going to be at least a little bit pretentious, especially. But also, this movie has part of its text is the conversation about being pretentious or not, with the Daniel
Right.
Day-Lewis character we were talking about with the novel and with the passion and etc. So I think the movie is really smart about like being very high art, very literary, but also sort of undercutting that a little bit and making a case, because at the end of the day, I feel like this is like a romantic comedy, like something, and I feel like because it's set in period dress and takes place in England,
Yeah.
a lot of people who might not give it a chance a day really love it and give it a shot, like people
Hmm.
who might not go to see, like, I don't know, like a Pretty Woman or something.
Right.
So yeah, so I would say it's a really, really cool balance, because it is, I feel, pretentious at first sight, but it's actually not that pretentious when you actually look about it. It's much more of a crowd pleaser.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I'd give it like I don't know, like a 6, just because of the pacing. Some people find it slow, and
Mm-hmm.
because of the period piece, some people just don't connect with that, and that's fine. But I would say I actually think it's less pretentious than than Howard's End.
Sure.
It's definitely more accessible than that, and I think it's also probably more accessible than Call Me by Your Name, which I don't know. It just depends. Different time, I
Yeah.
guess. I like all three of those movies, but anyway, this is really, really good.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So what are you going to pick for the August selection for next month for the Criterion project?
Yes, right. Well, before we get into that, I just want to say what you were saying about the accessibility of the movie. For anyone listening who is interested, but maybe is a little reticent about period pieces or merchant ivory and stuffy British people or whatever, I think this is a great entry point. I think it's a good balance between, being a lot of fun and a lot of a very, very pleasing and easy to watch with having all of those like themes and styles. So I would say definitely a great entry point for this sort of movie.
Yeah. I think that's very true.
Yeah. With that being said, I talked about Pedro Almodovar at the beginning of the episode, and like I said, a lot of his movies are on the Criterion channel right now, including my pick for August. I figured there's a couple of things going on here. Pedro Almodovar is coming up with a new movie this year called Pain and Glory, which played at the Cannes Film Festival, and it's supposed to be really great and also a bit of almost like summation and like very personal movie in which he looks back at his life and his career and his work. And so I think that's kind of part of why they have put all his movies on Criterion, right? Because I think on disc, Criterion has really only released 2 of his movies, but they have put up a lot of them now on the channel. And one of them is All About My Mother from 1999, which obviously 20th anniversary and very popular movie, won the Best Foreign Language Film Oscar when it came out. And I think it's also one of the best ways to get into Pedro Almodovar. It's one of his most accessible and most fun and moving movies. So I'm really excited to share it with you and with anyone who wants to watch along at home.
Great. Oh, I'm excited to watch that. That'll be a lot of fun. So definitely make sure you guys watch that and let us know what you think about Room with a View. Is it a favorite of yours, or do you think it's kind of boring? Let's have a conversation. I would love to talk about that. And if you've read the book, I would love to hear your thoughts. It's a pretty straight adaptation. The only major differences between the book and the movie is that in the book there's more George is more political, and there's more conversation about socialism versus versus Lucy as being part of sort of the ruling,
more conservative,
the aristocratic kind of life, and so that's the only major difference. Plot point, it's pretty much beat for beat.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because in the movie they call Mr. Emerson like a radical, and I was like, that old man, he was just like a jolly fella, But I guess that makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah. So there we go. And I'm also curious if people agree that this is one of the great movie kisses, because I think it totally. All right. I think it's really good. So, all right. Well, great. And so, Conrado, how can people find you?
You can find me on the internet and Twitter. You can find me at Coco Hits New York, and you can also follow me in Letterboxd at Conrado Falco, and you can go on my blog if you want, which is Coco Hits New York. Actually, it's cocohitsny.wordpress.com. I have not been posting a lot lately, but reach out to me on Twitter if you like, and Letterboxd. I will be happy to have a conversation about movie kisses or whatever else.
Great. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews all over social media, iTunes and YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So check that out. I would really appreciate it. And I'm also at the Hallmarkies podcast. If you want more of my thoughts on romance and romantic movies, that's the place to go. So check that out. And again, let us know your thoughts. We would love to have a discussion, and we will talk again next month.
See you next month.
Okay. Bye.